Welcome to tutorial 5 in the video version of the Bowling League Tune-Up Quick Start. In this video, we're going to show you how to enter and import weekly bowler scores. Here's the ball and chain league as we last saw it. Here's Joe Bowler and the 6 weeks of scores that we entered for him already. Typically, this is not the most efficient way to enter bowler scores because typically a league is going to bowl a full week and you're going to want to enter the scores for all the bowlers at once. Rather than doing this with edit bowler windows individually for each of the 40 bowlers in this league, there are two buttons that might make weekly score entry easier. That'd be the Enter Scores button and the Import Scores button. The Enter Scores button simply brings up a list of all the teams and all the bowlers on each team. And all you have to do, if we click on the first bowler, game 1 for Joe Bowler, it brings up the score entry mode window, which is precisely the same window we had in the Edit Bowler window. So it works the same way. Let's say that in this week, Joe Bowler bowled a 154, a 161, and a 138. Then the next bowler, maybe not quite such a good bowler, bowled a 121, a 98, and a 115. And then maybe bowler 3 is a really excellent bowler, a 241, a 219, and a 196. We could continue doing this for all the bowlers. I will cancel out of score entry mode. What we want to do is enter all the scores we've put in here as a new week of scores for each of the bowlers. Simply click OK. Bowling League Tune-Up posts them. It shows that it has successfully posted scores for those 3 bowlers whose scores we just entered. When we check on Joe Bowler, we can see, indeed, the 3 scores we just added were included as a 7th week of scores, tacked onto the bottom of the scores he already had recorded. The other 2 bowlers now have scores. They never had scores recorded before, so they're entered as a first week's worth of scores. And we can see that these 3 entries are now showing up in blue, meaning Bowling League Tune-Up is computing their averages rather than us telling them the averages. So this is a much more efficient way of entering a week's worth of scores. There's potentially a much more efficient way than that, and that would be to import scores from a league recap sheet. League recap sheets typically look something like this, and many of them are available electronically nowadays. This one is for a league that was called Kings and Queens that bowled back in the fall of 2019. This was week 10 of the league. On the first page of this sheet were league standings and lane assignments for the week, etc. But we can see here on page 2, one of the sections is called Team Rosters. It includes a list of all the teams and all the bowlers and all sorts of statistics on each of the bowlers. And if we look at columns labeled 1, 2, and 3, these are the 3 games the bowlers bowled in week 10 of the league. So what we would love to do is extract these numbers so we don't have to type them in. By the way, we've blotted out the bowlers' names because they didn't give us permission to publicize their performances here, but we're going to pretend that these scores came from our ball and chain league. To do that, if this were a real PDF rather than just a picture of one, I could take the cursor at the beginning of Team 1 and drag it down to the end of Team 10. It would get all of the text, all of the numbers that you're seeing here, and enable Bowling League Tune-Up to pick out the actual scores. And I'll show how that works. So let's pretend that I've just highlighted it, and what you want to do then is click Control-C or right-click the highlighted entry and click the Copy option to copy the text that we just highlighted to the Windows clipboard. At that point, we can click Import Scores, which brings up this screen. In the upper left corner, we can click Control-V to paste what we just copied from the league recap sheet. This is a condensed version of all that text that we just saw. It's not very pretty, but it's readable. We can see the bowlers' names. We made up some names, so again, we're preserving the bowler's anonymity, but I made sure that the first bowler on Team 1 is still Joe Bowler. And we have some lines that don't even have bowlers in them. What we want to be able to do is tell Bowling League Tune-Up how to extract the scores from this list of text. And that's done down here in the Extract Format Definitions section. This is pretty straightforward, and it only has to be done once per league. From week to week, a league's recap sheets are going to have the same format. So once you've told Bowling League Tune-Up the format of your league recap sheet, all you have to do is copy, paste, and you're done. It already knows where the scores are. Let's do it for this first time for this league. Bowling League Tuneup needs to know about how many numeric fields are in a row. Well, if we count, we can see that in a bowler entry, there are 13 numbers in a row, and that would be the maximum. But we also see that this vacant bowler here only has 11 entries. Vacancies, there were a couple of fields that were left blank. So we'll say there's a minimum of 11 fields. We can see that this letter V here means a vacancy score. The letter A here means an absence score. These show up on this recap sheet before each of the scores, so these are called prefixes. So we're going to leave the prefixes used box checked. If those letters showed up after the scores, then we'd check suffixes used. Turns out for this league, an A precedes an absence score. The letter S precedes a substitute score. The letter V precedes a vacancy score. Down at the lower left, we can see, does each row contain exactly one team? No, absolutely not. But we can see that each row does contain at most one bowler. So we're going to check that box. All that's left is to tell Bowling League Tuneup where within this list of numbers can we find Game 1, Game 2, and Game 3. We might be tempted to say that Game 1 is in position 9 and Game 2 is in position 10 and Game 3 is in position 11. If we count 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, there's 9, 10, and 11, 137, 148, and 189 for Jeremy Sims. But that doesn't always work because we see that for the vacant bowler, the 3 Vs are not in positions 9, 10, and 11, but in positions 7, 8, and 9 because there are some missing fields for vacancy bowlers. We're in luck, though, because if we count from right to left, we can see that this is the 5th to last, 4th to last, and 3rd to last entry, and that's also true for a real bowler. So we're going to tell Bowling League Tuneup to scan rows from right to left rather than from left to right. And now Game 1 is in the 5th field from the right, Game 2 is in the 4th, and Game 3 is in the 3rd field from the right. We're now done defining our league. These definitions will remain when we save the league. We now want to click Extract to use our definitions. This looks excellent. What has happened is Bowling League Tuneup has used these definitions, looked at all of this text here, and said, okay, fine. It looks like Bowler 1 has 3 games of 108, 100, and 101. Well, if we look at Joe Bowler, Bowler 1, and we look at the 5th, 4th, and 3rd fields from the end, we see the 108, 100, and 101. That worked. And if we do that for all of these teams, all of these bowlers, we can see that it literally worked in all of them. When we go down here, we can see that Ricardo Lopez, the 3rd bowler on Team 6, was a substitute bowler. And sure enough, there are the S's to show substitute bowler. Notice the absence scores do not contain a score. That is correct for the way Bowling League Tuneup works because Bowling League Tuneup will compute what the absence score should be based on each bowler's current average. So this looks terrific. Sometimes you might want to fix things that didn't work in here. This is fully editable. This should have been a 184. You can just type an 8 there. That kind of error isn't going to occur too often, but sometimes there may be problems that you can't solve via extract definition entirely, so you can just make the changes manually here. One other thing that might happen is that the teams might not be listed in team order here. For example, leagues may put in their recap sheets bowlers' scores last week, but in the order that they bowled in pairs last week so that the teams are all mixed up. If that's the case, Bowling League Tuneup has a feature. If Strike Time really should be the top team in this league, it has a feature with reorder mode. If you click on it and move up like this, now Strike Time corresponds to this first row, and you can reorder the teams to correspond to this order here. As it turns out, in this case, the order is correct. I'll move Strike Time back to where it belongs. But just to show you that's an option. Once this looks right, which it does now, we're going to click Populate. That brings up the bowler score import form, which you should notice looks exactly the same as the bowler score entry form. There is no difference at all other than these instructions here. The only thing we have to do to this form is we notice that Team 6, Bowler 3, these entries are showing up in blue. In that case, what this means is, if you recall, this had a substitute bowler bowling. These were the substitute bowler's scores, but Bowling League Tuneup does not know that substitute bowler's average from which handicap is based. So if this bowler had a 132 average at the time he bowled these games, we're going to have to designate 132 here. And it does remember, but we're going to have to do that for each of the blue scores to say this was a substitute score. And then we'll cancel out of score entry mode, which again is identical to the score entry mode window that you saw before. So now this shows up as a substitute entry. We have our absence entry. Here's a vacancy entry. We're now going to go ahead and post these scores by clicking OK. Just like when we did the enter scores by importing scores, it tells us that scores were posted for all 40 bowlers in the league successfully. When we click OK, we can look here. If we look at any bowler, we can see now there's an 8th week of scores. Doesn't look like Joe Bowler did too well in the 8th week because these weren't his scores. But we have now added a week of scores to all of the bowlers in the league. We didn't do any typing, and it took no time at all. And you'll notice if we click import scores again, all of the values that we just set for format definitions are remembered. We'll never have to type those again in this league. So we have now learned how to enter and import scores in a much more efficient manner. All that's left now that we have actual bowler scores in here, we're going to want to learn how to perform mid and postseason league analyses and create bowler performance sheets, and that's what we're going to do in the next video.